Hello, everybody, and welcome to Economics and You. I am your host, Mr. Samuelson. Today, it's all about the growth in the size of government. Our government, it is growing. It has been growing at a large rate for quite some time. Why? Let's take a look at it. Beginning with acknowledging that it's happening. Okay, the number of people employed by the government has increased from about 3 million people to about 22 million people in the last 90 years. Now, the US population has been increasing, but not nearly at that rate. We do not have not four times. We don't have 7 times the population that we had 90 years ago. So the government growth is really outpacing the growth of our population as a whole. This is because the government now serves way more functions than it did in the past. Government does a lot more, and therefore it is a lot bigger. Now, what am I talking about? Well, one thing that we're talking about here are public works projects. Public works projects make up any number of physical projects, roads and buildings and whatnot, that use tax dollars for the public good. Anytime the government is involved in building something to help everybody, we call that a public works project. The dams throughout the United States. In a lot of cases, fields of windmills are government invested or at least government subsidized. Large building of bridges and highway systems, replacing the gas lines in your city. These can all be public works projects that are funded either entirely or just partially through government action. But that all takes people working for the government. Now, why has government grown? Well, the expansion of the role of our government really took off during the Great Depression. Prior to the Great Depression, we had this whole laissez-faire approach, let the people deal with their issues. We grow stronger as a society by letting society tackle its own problems. And in the Great Depression, we learned that there really are some things that people can't solve for themselves. Sometimes government does need to step in and alleviate some of the problems of society. And so the government grew. The government became bigger in order to solve these problems. And it just kept going. Today, 20% of all of the money spent in our country is spent by the US government in order to address issues of public concern. Now, how big really is the government? Well, it's big. It's very big. But we can't measure the size of our government just by looking at government spending. We can't just say, 20% of all the dollars spent are spent by the government. It's actually bigger than that. And it's bigger than that because of the rules the government has put in place on public individuals and private individuals and private institutions that require them to spend additional money to meet government regulations or government rules, and sometimes to hire people just to check to make sure that they are in compliance with all of these rules. These people don't work for the government. They don't count as government spending, and yet their jobs and that spending exists because of these government regulations. And that really does increase the actual impact of our government on our society as a whole. So, is all of this good or is it bad? Well, there's, of course, both. The good things included are that a growing government is addressing more of the concerns of the public. More people are being helped. We have far less absolute poverty than we did during the Gilded Age and the Great Depression. And that is because of government, period. Now, the bad part here is that growing governments do cost the taxpayers a lot more money. And this is, a dramatic amount of spending that has increased over this stretch of time. And it's projected to just continue and continue and continue. Now, this spending does not always meet the needs or the wants of all people. And there are certainly people who are taxed and therefore are spending more of their money on services that they don't necessarily agree with. And that is causing a lot of friction in our society. So that is the sum of our problem, or not lack of problem, with the growth of government in America. I hope that you learned something today and that you enjoyed this lesson. I will see you next time. Farewell.